Good morning, good evening, or good night, whichever one it is for you, whichever one it is. I'm very glad you're here to join me for this week's video, which is a bit of a different one because I don't usually stand in my videos. So, what in the world could be going on here? Well, I think it's quite obvious you can all read, but I do want to show you my bookshelves. That is the whole point here. I really want to document my bookshelves as of right now because I am currently still at the point where it is feasible for me to do kind of a more like in-depth bookshelf. I don't own enough books yet for that not to be possible or like psychologically sustainable for me to go in depth with every single book I own. And in depth is kind of, you have to take that lightly because I would like to first of all go shelf by shelf and just show you the shelves and what my ideas are behind having that shelf the way it is. But I also would kind of like to at least show you every single book I own and maybe pick out some special ones if I have some special thoughts about some of these. I will need to stop myself here because when it comes to books, I kind of don't know how to shut up. But we're gonna see how this is gonna work. I don't really know what else to say. I hope you enjoy. I hope this is something you're interested in because I sure am going to show it to you. So, yeah, I think the best way to start is just with the obvious one that's right next to me. It is also the topmost part of my bookshelf. First of all, this entire shelf I call my trophy bookshelf because there is more space here. It's just easier to decorate. It's easier to keep it a bit prettier. In my opinion, this is the pretty bookshelf at least. And I have a lot of trinkets, and these are all hardcovers, which I don't own many, so they are mostly all concentrated here. This first shelf is made up entirely of Pan Macmillan Collector's Library editions. I know that is quite the title for an edition. They are some of my favorite editions. First of all, I love the covers. I love how tiny they are. I just love reading tiny books, but also just I don't know, they're pretty, they look pretty, and that is really all I care about. So let's first move these out of the way because they are kind of in the way. And let me start over here because that's just gonna be the easiest. This first one is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, obviously. And this is kind of where I want to show you. They always have a quote on the back, which I just think is so cool because that's so, it gives you kind of an insight into the book you're buying, which I just really like. So that is the first one. Then The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, The Call of the Wild and White Fang by Jack London, The Tales and Poems by Edgar Allan Poe, The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, The Happy Prince and Other Stories by Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, probably my favorite on this shelf because it's just one of my favorite books of all time, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James, my favorite cover because it has a sergeant, my favorite sergeant, or one of my favorite sergeants actually, so this is just a win-win for me. Walden by Henry David Thoreau, Hamlet by William Shakespeare, Macbeth by William Shakespeare, King Lear by William Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, also by William Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing, guess what? It is also a play of Shakespeare's, and finally The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare, my favorite Shakespeare, by the way. I think that's an unpopular opinion, but I think this is his best work, at least of the ones I've read, which I have read all of these books. These are all books I have read on this shelf, which is going to be a theme because I read most of the books on my bookshelves are books I have read. They usually don't go here if I have not. So yeah, that was my Pan Macmillan shelf, one I am very, very happy about. I just think they look so pretty once again. Next up, we have this random accumulation. There was a time in my life where I got really obsessed with these specifically, like special editions of books I love in general, but specifically this dream of having a shelf filled with these vintage leather-bound hardcovers of books I find very special. And so I did that for a little bit, and this is kind of the result of my special edition acquiring. Also, just books I love. These are all books I love for different reasons, but without further ado, let's get right into it. On this shelf, we have, first of all, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, the most expensive book I have ever bought, but I just could not resist. It is also my favorite book I have ever bought. It is my prized possession, honestly. If this room were to be on fire, this is the book I'd save, probably. The Folio Society edition of The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Such a stunning book. Then we have The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, also in the Folio Society edition. Just stunning. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Oh, these are the Franklin Library editions. Virgil's Aeneid. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The first book of the Heaven Official's Blessing series. The second book of the Heaven Official's Blessing series. The third book of the Heaven Official's Blessing series. The fourth book of the Heaven Official's Blessing series. And the fifth book also of that series, which is the last one I currently own. There's one left that's out currently that I haven't yet bought, and then there's two more that are going to be released soon, but I will be owning them at one point, and I just find them so stunning. Also, the fact that they have sprayed edges that make up this little collage of instances of the story, that is just so special. I love it. Let's move you over here for a second. Okay, and then finally I have this edition, or like a pack of editions, I guess, of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which I found really cute. And when I decided I wanted to read them, I thought these were good, but, well, The Hobbit was okay to read of these. But then, look at this. I don't know if this translates on camera, but this is the tiniest text I have ever seen. Like, the Pan Macmillans, they have small text. Here, let me show you. It's kind of small, but it's readable, absolutely readable. But this is like, I don't know who has the eyesight for this, but I could never have read them. So yeah, these did kind of end up as trophy books, but they do well as book stoppers, and I find them pretty. They're just not readable. Okay, next up, this right here is my children's book collection. But technically not just children's books, because you will see there are some other books on here, mainly Jane Austen's. But I just think the theme goes well. And these are all kind of books that I find really wholesome, that I just love to reread, that kind of give my brain a break. And that I don't know, children's books, I think anyone and everyone should read and enjoy, or can read and enjoy children's books. They are so special. They have such great messages. And yeah, this is maybe my second favorite shelf, honestly. I think it's so pretty. The colors are so satisfying. Most of these are in the Wordsworth Collector's Library Edition, I believe they're called, which are some of my favorite editions of books ever. I think they are beautiful. My goal would be to have like a huge shelf only of their editions, because I just think they are prettier than any other editions out there. Okay, first up, let's save our little trinkets. By the way, all of these trinkets I own, or most of them at least, all of the ones that kind of look like this, are by the brand Reda, which I don't know if that's a German brand or not, or if you can get your hands on them anywhere else than in Germany. But this is my favorite kind of brand for little trinkets. I love these tiny little things that they make, and I think they are so pretty. And yeah, whenever I see some, I buy them. So you are gonna see many, many more of them over the course of this video. And then also this little cow, because I love cows, they are my favorite animals, and it just needed to be there. It belonged here, I don't know. And then up here I have a little shell with shells in it, where I just kind of, whenever I go to the ocean, which is my favorite place to be, I kind of pick one or two shells and then I put them in here, which I find kind of special, and to have it on this shelf specifically is just very special to me, I don't know. Okay, on this shelf, we are gonna start over here. The first one that we have is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Maxey. Then obviously The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This is a special edition that Pan Macmillan did of this book for an anniversary, and I adore it. It has this, I don't know if this is coming across on camera, but this stencil thingy inside of it. Okay, next up over here, This is actually probably, of the books I own, the one with the most sentimental value, because this is a children's book that I have owned, or that my family has owned since I was like a baby, and my parents would always read this to me. And the reason it's so special, it's first of all just because of that, but also because I colored into it. So that is kind of, I don't know why, it just has a lot of sentimental value to me. So I love this one, it had to be on here. And then actually, I do have the German edition of The Little Prince as well, just because I love it. This is actually my mom's, but she was kind enough to gift it to me because you can never have enough editions of your favorite books. Then, the first one of the Wordsworth Collector's Library editions is Anne of Green Gables by Ella Montgomery. This is also one of those books that I just think is so beautiful and so aptly decorated for the story it tells. Then Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, my favorite Jane Austen, The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, Anne of Avonlea by Ella Montgomery, Emma by Jane Austen, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, Persuasion by Jane Austen, my second favorite Jane Austen. Or it's between this and Sense and Sensibility. And this is a box set of A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, which is just, there is Now We Are Six, which is the last one, then When We Were Young, The House at Pooh Corner, and Winnie the Pooh. Beautiful, stunning. I love that story so much, and I'm so happy I own these. That is that. Then we have my Tolkien shelf. Tolkien is one of my favorite authors, and I just love the fact that I own enough books by him now to have a shelf. These are also just all stunning. And on this shelf, first of all, a little angel. The first one on this shelf is Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien, obviously, which is one of my favorites. It is just stunning. I reread it every year during Christmas. Then The Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, The Fall of Gondolin, The Fall of Númenor, Unfinished Tales of Númenor and Middle-earth, and then a box set of The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, The Return of the King, The Silmarillion, and finally my newest acquisition, Letters that Tolkien wrote, which is a huge chunker, by the way, but I am so excited to read it. It is stunning. And finally, down here, 27 books of my childhood nostalgia series. These are the Three Investigators. They are all German books. In German, they're called Die drei Fragezeichen. And it's just, I love them so much, and I recently acquired all of them because I really wanted to collect them. And this is kind of the starting point. First of all, here we have a little candle, which is my favorite scent of candle, but I do have dogs and I don't want to burn it because I don't want to like poison their lungs or anything. So it is just residing here as a book stopper, which is just perfect. Also stones that keep crashing down because my dogs like to just push them down, but they are all from the ocean, from when I went to the ocean this year, which they are just very special because of it. Let me try to get these books out without moving those stones. That is gonna be tough. Okay, first of all, we have Jugendkrimis zum Selberlösen, which is basically just crime stories you can solve yourself. Not really interested in them, but they came with the pack I bought. Then Geheimdienst, das verschwundene Dokument, the vanishing document, or the document that vanished. Die drei Fragezeichen und der magische Kreis, the Three Investigators and the Magical Circle. Die drei Fragezeichen und das Aztekenschwert, the Three Investigators and the Aztec Sword, the Three Investigators and the Parrot, the Super Parrot, die drei Fragezeichen und der Superpapagei, die drei Fragezeichen und die flüsternde Mumie and the Whispering Mummy, die drei Fragezeichen und der grüne Geist, the Three Investigators and the Green Ghost, die drei Fragezeichen und der verschwundene Schatz, the Three Investigators and the Vanished Treasure, die drei Fragezeichen und die Geisterinsel, the Three Investigators and the Ghost Island, die drei Fragezeichen und die silberne Spinne, the Three Investigators and the Silver Spider, die drei Fragezeichen und der seltsame Wecker, the Strange Clock. These are all not correct translations, by the way, of these titles. I'm just coming up with what I believe kind of gets the gist across, but I think you can find the original titles quite easily online if you want to. The Three Investigators and the Devil's Mountain und der Teufelsberg. Die drei Fragezeichen und der lachende Schatten and the Laughing Shadow. Die drei Fragezeichen und die schwarze Katze. The Three Investigators and the Black Cat. Die drei Fragezeichen und der unheimliche Drache. The Three Investigators and the Spooky Dragon. The Scary Dragon. Die drei Fragezeichen und die flammende Spur. And the Flaming Tracks. Die drei Fragezeichen und der rasende Löwe. The Wild Lion. Die drei Fragezeichen und die singende Schlange. And the Singing Snake. Die drei Fragezeichen und der Phantomsee. The Phantom Sea. The Phantom Lake. Die drei Fragezeichen und das Bergmonster. And the Mountain Monster. This is my favorite. This is absolutely my favorite of them. Die drei Fragezeichen und der Fluch des Rubins. The Curse of the Ruby, maybe? Die drei Fragezeichen und die gefährliche Erbschaft. And the Dangerous Inheritance. Die drei Fragezeichen und die rätselhaften Bilder. The Mysterious Paintings. Die drei Fragezeichen und der tanzende Teufel. The Dancing Devil. Die drei Fragezeichen und der Karpatenhund. And the I don't know what the hell Karpatenhund means in English, I'm sorry. Die drei Fragezeichen und die Silbermine, The Silver Mine. Die drei Fragezeichen und das Gespensterschloss, and the Ghostly Castle. Okay, and because we're already down here, let's just remain down here and move one over, because now we are at the section of my Russian classics / Greek classics, just classics, the real actual classics. It is mainly consisting of the Everyman's library editions I own, which I just adore so much. If I could, I would just have an entire library filled with them because I think they are stunning. They are so high quality. First on this shelf is the penguin cloth-bound edition of the Iliad by Homer, which is translated by Evie Rieu. I'm not sure here. Now you can see, I don't know how to pronounce their name, but I did not like this edition. I did not like this translation, so I stopped reading from this one and I picked up a different one, and that edition, that translation I preferred. And I don't actually own that one anymore, but I do plan on rereading it, that time from this edition, because I really want to read all of the translations of the Iliad at some point in my life. And the next one I'm going to get to is by Robert Fitzgerald, which is obviously in the Everyman's Library editions. I just love this so much. I love the painting, I love the quality, and I've heard very good things about that translation. And that is why I also own Robert Fitzgerald's translation of the Odyssey by Homer, which is a translation of that book I have not read. I also read a different one. I would have to look up which one that was exactly. And then I have Anne Carson's translation of an Oresteia, which consists of Agamemnon by Aeschylus, Electra by Sophocles, and Orestes by Euripides. It is so accessible, and I cannot praise it enough. It is a masterpiece of translation and just, I don't know, beauty, poetry. Then we start with the Russian classics. The first one here is the collected tales of Nikolai Gogol. Then Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Double and the Gambler, The Adolescent by Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is incredibly beat up because I have reread this so many times. It is one of my favorite books of all time. Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, also missing the dust jacket. That is really sad, but oh well, it is what it is. Notes from a Dead House by Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of my favorites by him. Then The Idiot, my second favorite Dostoevsky after The Brothers Karamazov. Notes from the Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. The complete short novels of Anton Chekhov's. Novels, Tales and Journeys. The complete prose by Alexander Pushkin. Ivan Turgenev's A Sportsman's Notebook. And finally, this stunning box set of War and Peace. It splits the book up in 3, which I think is just much more manageable. This is obviously by Leo Tolstoy. This is what they look like inside. Moving over, we have kind of a random shelf because these up to this point are all non-fiction. And then it just kind of dissolves into whatever. It started as a non-fiction shelf, but I honestly don't own enough for there to be a whole shelf, and I needed the space, so it kind of became what it is now. On this shelf, we have The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, Der Tod in Venedig by Thomas Mann, The Death in Venice, Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann, Dr. Faustus by Thomas Mann, Last Summer in the City by Gianfranco Caligaric, Die Leiden des jungen Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, which is the sorrows of young Werther, Stoner by John Williams, Last Words from Montmartre by Xiu Mao Jin, Rainer Maria Rilke Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, the German edition of Letters to a Young Poet, which in German is called Briefe an einen jungen Dichter. Also sprach Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. In English, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. The Fall by Albert Camus. The Plague by Albert Camus. The Stranger by Albert Camus. The Letters of Vincent van Gogh, one of my absolute favorite books of all time, maybe in the top 2 most influential books I have ever read. This is my whole heart belongs to this book. The Complete Poems by Emily Bronte. The Complete Poems by Emily Dickinson. Letters to Milena by Franz Kafka. Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. Seneca's On the Happy Life. The Art of War by Sun Tzu. The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. This is the translation by Jonathan Starr. This is my favorite book of philosophy of all time. It is one of my favorite books of all time, and I have read it in several translations, and this is, in my opinion, by far the best. It takes more liberty with the language, but I think it does a much better job at expressing what the Tao Te Ching is actually trying to express rather than just literally translating the words on page. I think this has much more of an impact, and if you do decide to read it in any translation, I think pick up this one because it's an entirely different reading experience. The Hua Hu Xing, also by Lao Tzu. Eine Arbeiterin by Didier Eribon. White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. About Love by Anton Chekhov. Street Haunting by Virginia Woolf. The Cossacks by Leo Tolstoy, arguably my favorite Tolstoy. A Spy in the House of Love by Anais Nin. Another edition of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Can you tell I love that book? Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. And surprise, surprise, another edition of A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. Now, one level further up, now I can actually talk to you again face to face, because down there I would have had to lie on the floor. That was the first floor of this bookshelf. The second floor, this is kind of where it starts to get a bit random, which the entire thing is kind of random, but I do kind of like to sort by editions and, if possible, by authors, specifically when I've managed to collect every single book by the author in the same edition, which I kind of always try to do. So first of all, for this little stack, we have Flush by Virginia Woolf, The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, Independent People by Haldor Laxness, Salka Valka, also by Haldor Laxness, which, by the way, is one of my favorite authors. This is kind of a shelf for my favorite authors. Among other things, The Atom Station by Haldor Laxness, Fish Can Sing by Haldor Laxness, which is my favorite by him, and Under the Glacier, also by Haldor Laxness. And then there's a little Virginia Woolf section, starting with Monday or Tuesday. Then we have Orlando by Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, The Waves, which is by far my favorite by her. I think this book is so stunning. Mrs. Dalloway, Night and Day, and Between the Acts. And that leads us to the Shirley Jackson area, which Haldor Laxness, Virginia Woolf, and Shirley Jackson are 3 of my all-time favorite authors, which is why I really like that they are together here. I think that just, I don't know, in my head that is very satisfying. So yeah, the Shirley Jackson section starts off with Life Among the Savages, Raising Demons, The Road Through the Wall, Let Me Tell You, Hangs a Man, The Lottery and Other Stories, Dark Tales, Just an Ordinary Day, The Bird's Nest, The Sundial, We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and The Haunting of Hill House, which is my favorite by her. One of my favorite books, again. I just adore this one. And then just a stack of Penguin Modern Classics that I just think work well here because they fit the theme of Penguin Modern Classics being next to each other. First of all, The Ice Palace by Jorge Vesos, and The Birds, also by Jorge Vesos, one of my favorite books. This is a stunning book. I highly recommend you check it out. It is beautiful. The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim, The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall, Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, Another Country, also by James Baldwin, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce, Dubliners, also by James Joyce, and finally, The Accomplishment of My Reading Career, Ulysses by James Joyce, which I am honestly quite proud that I have read that book. Okay, that's that. Also, this little guy. Haven't showed him to you yet. He's also from that brand Hoarder that I was talking about earlier. And then scooting over. This is kind of my Japanese literature section. One of my favorite sections because Japanese literature is just one of my favorite things ever. Well, Kazuo Ishiguro is kind of the exception because he's both a Japanese and a British author. But it fits the vibe, and some of these books are set in Japan, so I think it makes sense. First of all, a little trinket, again by Hoarder, this little kitty that is hanging out on top of a bowl. Very, very cute. Okay, let's start here. The first one on this shelf is A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. Then we have Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro. The Remains of the Day. When We Were Orphans. Never Let Me Go. One of the most devastating books I have ever read and definitely my favorite by him. And The Unconsoled by Kazuo Ishiguro. An absolute fever dream. And now the place where my heart kind of lies is my Dazai section. I have trouble deciding the rankings of my favorite authors, but Dazai is one who I can't read him always because I have to be in a very specific headspace, but if I am in that headspace, he is the only thing I can read. And he is one of those people who I feel he expresses himself in a way that is more relatable than any other person I have ever read from. And so yeah, he's very special. And I do believe I have read everything by him that is translated into English currently. First of all, we have Schoolgirl by Osamu Dazai. Then Daffodil, Otogitsoshi, the fairy tale book of Osamu Dazai. A very fun read. No One Knows by Osamu Dazai. It is a good one, but do not start with this one. It will give you a very warped idea of who this man is, in my opinion. The Flowers of Buffoonery, The Beggar's Student. Honestly, one of my favorite reading experiences of any Dazai book. No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. One of my two absolute favorites by him and a book that I continue to reread over and over and over again. I adore this story, but do be warned, it is incredibly sad. The Setting Sun by Osamu Dazai. Objectively speaking, probably his best work. Self-Portraits by Osamu Dazai. The other favorite Dazai of mine, along with No Longer Human. This is much more lighthearted, although it also contains a lot of the seriousness. Blue Bamboo by Osamu Dazai. And then that is it for the Dazai section. Now we have one that I have been debating on getting rid of. I love the edition, but I just absolutely hated this book. It is the only book I have ever read that I have really hated with a passion. It is Naomi by Yuichiro Tanizaki. Then my little Kawabata collection, which is definitely still gonna grow, but I absolutely love that man. I think he writes beautiful stories, and he's just one of these staples of Japanese classic literature. Starting out with Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata, Thousand Cranes by Kawabata, Dandelions, which I think probably is at least one of my favorites. The Sound of the Mountain, which I also really like. And finally, Beauty and Sadness by Kawabata. And then starts the Mishima collection, who Mishima honestly is my favorite author. He's the only one where I can confidently say he is my favorite author. I'm gonna say this so many times. I adore his books. I adore what he does with literature, and I think he does something with literature that no one else ever has, ever will, ever could, ever would be capable of. Okay. First of all, we have Forbidden Colors, a highly underrated and very, very personal to him story. Then Confessions of a Mask, Death in Midsummer, which is a short story collection that includes the story Patriotism, which, if you know anything about Mishima, is going to be the most disturbing and fascinating and unforgettable thing you will ever read by him, because it is all about seppuku in excruciating detail, and Mishima himself committed that act, and so it is insane to read, but I highly recommend it. I found it incredibly impactful. Life for Sale, one of the absolute strangest reading experiences I have ever had. The Frolic of the Beasts, absolutely disturbing, by the way. Voices of the Fallen Heroes and Other Stories. And Sun and Steel by Yukio Mishima. His personal testament on art, action, and ritual death. Highly, highly fascinating. If you want to learn more about that man, this is where you should go. Star by Yukio Mishima, a teeny tiny little one. Not to be confused with Beautiful Star, also by Yukio Mishima, which apparently was his favorite of his books, at least up to a certain point in time. The Temple of the Golden Pavilion. And then these are the 4 books of the Sea of Fertility tetralogy, which is his final work, his masterpiece. The first one is Spring Snow, then Runaway Horses, my favorite of the 4, The Temple of Dawn, and The Decay of the Angel. These 4 books are absolutely unforgettable. They are my favorite by him. They are why he is my favorite. Words do not describe how much I love these books. And I highly urge you to read them, really. They impressed me like almost no other book ever has impressed me. I absolutely love them. Then we have After the Banquet, The Sound of Waves. Very unique Mishima, because this is absolutely wholesome, which that man never wrote wholesome stories, so this is quite interesting. Thirst for Love, definitely not wholesome. And The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. After Frolic of the Beasts, his most disturbing book. Moving up once again, first of all, these are my beige books, I would say. There is a little lotus flower, which is a candle holder, which I absolutely love, and I think they go very well because technically speaking, these are all just mass market paperback classics. Most of them are used and vintage, and I absolutely love these editions, all of them. I love how they look. I love to read from them. I just adore them. Also, they are incredibly cheap, which is nice. But then there's also my trophy editions of The Sea of Fertility by Yukio Mishima, which are here because they do not fit down there. I ran out of space, and I just think I want to see them. I want them to not be crammed anywhere. These are the vintage classic editions of Spring Snow, Runaway Horses, The Temple of Dawn, and The Decay of the Angel. Okay, and then we continue on with Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And then from this point onwards up to, I think here, these are all the Penguin Popular Classic editions, which I adore. The first one I have is Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Bleak House by Charles Dickens, Paradise Lost by John Milton, which is my favorite cover. I think the cover is just so aptly chosen, and something about it just feels so precious. Also, it is one of my favorite books ever, so maybe that is why. Another edition of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, which is the one I read it from. The Diary of a Nobody by George and Wyndham Grossmith, one of my favorite books of this year. It is absolutely gorgeous. The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. The Ambassadors by Henry James. And someone accidentally shipped 2 copies of this. I only paid for one though, so that is nice, but I do have 2 editions of Daisy Miller by Henry James, Washington Square by Henry James, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, also one of my favorite books of this year. It is unforgettable and I highly recommend you read it. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I adore this cover. I don't know why, I just find this I don't know, something about it just speaks to me. This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. And then finally, this is not vintage, I got this new, but it kind of fits the vibe. It is the complete novels and stories of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. It is volume 1. It is one of the only books on my bookshelves that I have not completely read yet because I do like to take my time with this one. And then moving over, we have my Penguin Classic editions, the blackspine ones, which are some of my favorites, honestly. I love their quality. I get most of my classics in this edition, honestly. And first of all, this little guy, it's a little piggy, also by the brand Reda. It resides up here, and I think that is my sign to start over here with my little stack of Bronte books. These are all of the novels that the Brontes wrote. I have read all of them, which is kind of cool. I kind of love that a little bit for me. First of all, of course, we have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, which is one of my favorite books of all time, by far my favorite Bronte work. Then we have The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, Villette by Charlotte Bronte, my favorite book by her, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Shirley by Charlotte Bronte, and finally The Professor by Charlotte Bronte. And then a new discovery, which one of you kindly recommended to me, Catherine Mansfield's The Garden Party and Other Stories. And then my teeny tiny little E.M. Forster collection, who is an author I recently discovered I absolutely adore. First of all, we have Maurice by E.M. Forster, then A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, Howard's End, which is my favorite by him. I love this one. A Room with a View obviously also by Ian Forster. Where Angels Fear to Tread by Ian Forster. And then we have a Gothic classics section, which Gothic classics along with Japanese literature are my favorite kinds of literature. And yeah, I love them all. The first one here is Henry James's The Turn of the Screw. Then another edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is the 1818 text. Of course, I also own Bram Stoker's Dracula. Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Other Tales of Terror. And then my second favorite Gothic classic, because nothing will ever top Frankenstein, but I do really, really love The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I highly recommend it. It is so good. That's it for the Gothic classics. And then we have Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South, Alexandre Dumas' The Three Musketeers, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, an even better book than The Count of Monte Cristo in my opinion. One of my favorite books of all time now. I cannot shut up about this book, and I think that tells you something. It is, I just love this book so much. Then we have Ovid's Metamorphoses, Lu Guangzhong's The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. I am probably most certainly butchering his name. I'm very sorry about that. But this is a very, very fascinating book. It is quite the reading experience. I will just say that much. I really, really liked it. Ryunosuke Akutagawa, Rashomon, and 17 Other Stories. The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, one of my favorite Russian classics. It is so entertaining. Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. This and The Cossacks are my favorite. I go back and forth which one, but it is absolutely beautiful. It contains one of my favorite quotes ever. So yeah, Anna Karenina is a very good book. It is hyped for a reason. Then Ivan Turgenev's First Love, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Poor Folk and Other Stories, Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich and Other Stories. And those were all of my Penguin Blackspine classics, which I really like, and I think this is probably my most extensive collection of editions. I don't have any edition as much and frequently as I do this one. Next, this shelf is my contemporary shelf. All of the books that were published in the last few years that are considered contemporary. Obviously, I don't think I need to explain that to you, but you can see it is quite a bit smaller, or that collection is quite a bit smaller than my classics collection, because I only recently started getting into reading contemporary books. I just tend to reach for classics more. But I am trying to change that, because some of these books are favorites now, or many of them actually. And yeah, I've gotten a taste for them. And so this will not stay as small as it is. And firstly, there's this little angel. This is the one trinket of this shelf. The first book I have here is Circe by Madeline Miller. Then this is one of my favorite book series of all time. It is The Bear and the Nightingale trilogy by Catherine Arden. I adore it. It is perfect for winter, by the way. The first one is called The Bear and the Nightingale. The second one is The Girl in the Tower. And then there's The Winter of the Witch. Then I have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and one of my favorite books, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which is the reason why I own two of it. Then I have The Safekeep by Yael van der Woerden, but I am obviously not saying that name correctly. In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. The first of my Anne Carsons, which is Wrong Norma, a poetry collection. Plain Water by Anne Carson. Autobiography of Red, also by Anne Carson. And Men in the Off Hours, also by Anne Carson. Then A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. It is also one of my favorites on here. James by Percival Everett. Another edition of The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which is also one of my favorite books of all time. And then a new discovery, Olga Tokarczuk, which all of these three books are new favorites, which goes to show something, because she is just brilliant. The first one I own is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. The Impusium, a health resort horror story, also by Olga Tokarczuk, which is my favorite by her. And then this little guy, it's just a little guy. The Books of Jacob, which is also one of the feats of my literary career. To have read this book, and I absolutely adored it. I loved it so much. It is gonna be unforgettable forever. I'm very certain of that. And then my designated Han Kang section, which Han Kang is also one of my favorite authors. She's the one that rivals Mishima for my favorite author spot, because I just she does something about that woman just, I don't know, moves me. Her literature moves me. And the first one of Han Kang's I have is We Do Not Part. Then I have Greek Lessons, Human Acts, which is the saddest book I have ever read. Absolutely horrifying, but so important and brilliant. And the Korean edition of Sensation, and the Korean edition of The White Book, which is my favorite. The White Book is by far my favorite by her, which is why I do have that also in Korean, even though I cannot technically even read that book. And then, of course, the English edition of The White Book. And then over here, I just turned on the fairy lights for you to set the mood, I suppose. This is the little Christmas shrine I have, which is not fully decorated yet, because as of right now, for me, it is the middle of October. And not even I can justify putting up the Christmas tree in October. Although, honestly, I am very tempted. Still, I do have some decorations here already because Christmas is just the most wonderful time of the year. And it's so sad that it's only 1 month that's really acceptable as Christmas. So that is why I have an entire shelf of Christmas stuff. So yeah, most of these decorations, all of these decorations actually, except for this little guy, which is just, I don't know how you would, a squeeze ball? That is definitely not how you say that in English, but he kind of, I like him. He's just sitting there. And the other ones are all a reindeer, a Santa, an angel, and just Christmas trees, all by that brand Reda that I was talking about. This is also a Reda thingy, just like little lights that I will never burn because it's way too precious for it. But as for the actual books, the one that's sitting right up here is the one that's screaming at me to talk about first. This is A Book for Christmas by Selma Lagerlöf. Then the one that's sitting right on top. This is Old Christmas by Washington Irving, which is right on top because it is my favorite Christmas story by far. Underneath that one is The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffmann. Then A Scandinavian Christmas, Festive Tales for a Nordic Noel. And A German Christmas, Festive Tales from Berlin to Bavaria. And finally, Classic Tales of Christmas, which is just such a fun little edition. It includes A Christmas Carol, The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, The Little Match Girl, The Gift of the Magi, and other favorites. Just a lot of Christmas stories from all over the world. And that is really it. That is all for my Christmas collection. It is not yet very substantial, but it is definitely going to be expanded at some point. And then up here, you cannot really see, but I'm just gonna get it down right now because I do own 2 volumes of Jujutsu Kaisen, which is my favorite manga. They're volume 0 and volume 9, which are my favorites of the manga. And I wanted to own them because this story means a lot to me, and I wanted at least 2 to represent that, because bookshelves are supposed to kind of represent you, aren't they? So yeah, those are here as well. And now it's kind of getting awkward because it's really difficult to film this section of my room, but I have also kind of had to expand my books over to this side of the room because I just don't have any space anymore. And this has kind of just become my Halloween sort of stories, spooky stories. Basically, these are all books that I've very recently read and that I just kind of wanted to put here all together. I think they kind of look nice. The first one here is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Other Stories. It includes other stories by Washington Irving, who again wrote my favorite Christmas stories. So I can't wait to read some Halloween stories by him. That's gonna be so nice. In the Company of Witches by Orly Wallace, one of the most wholesome things I have ever read. The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice, the second book in the Vampire Chronicles, which I am looking forward to reading a lot. Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, the first book in the Vampire Chronicles. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, one of my favorites in this little stack here. And The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. And this is technically not a book, but oh well, I'm just gonna show it to you. My favorite movie, Loving Vincent, or one of my favorite movies. It is an entirely hand-animated movie about Van Gogh. And these 2 over here are just the books I'm currently in the middle of, so they reside there. The first one is When the Crow's Away, also by Orly Wallace. It's the sequel of In the Company of Witches, and I am having a very good time with it. And The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, which is my current audiobook, which is why it doesn't have a bookmark, but that is there too, because technically, yes, I am in the middle of that one too. Then for this shelf, we really only have 3 books, because currently I don't have enough Stephen Kings to fill up 2 shelves of books by Stephen King, but do trust me, that point is gonna be reached at some point in time. But for now, I have Salem's Lot by Stephen King, which I love this edition so much. The Shining by Stephen King. And then over here, Fairy Tale, also by Stephen King. Honestly, one of my favorites by him. And then down here, this is the actual proper Stephen King shelf, which as you can see is entirely full. And on this shelf, I have Bag of Bones, 11/22/63, Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, End of Watch, Doctor Sleep, which is the sequel to The Shining, which I have not yet read, but I am looking forward to doing so very, very soon. Pet Cemetery by Stephen King, which is honestly one of my favorites by him. Then Insomnia, which is absolutely my favorite Stephen King. I love that book so much. I cannot wait to reread it because it is just... Please read Insomnia. It is so, so underrated. The Dark Half, which is also very good. Carrie, The Dead Zone, which is also very high up the list for my favorite Stephen King. I really, really like this one too. And finally, It, also by Stephen King, of course. And that concludes the Stephen King section of the bookshelf. Those are all of his I have up to this point collected. And then down here, this is incredibly difficult to show you, but I'm gonna try my best. This is my TBR shelf. These are all of the books I haven't read yet, and I'm just gonna go through them really, really quickly. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, Eros and the Bittersweet by Anne Carson, The Bhagavad Gita by Harichetan. I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'm very sorry. The Secret History by Donna Tartt, If We Were Villains by Emma Rio, Grief Lessons, 4 plays by Euripides, translated by Anne Carson, Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus, East of Eden by John Steinbeck, Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino, The Baron in the Trees by Calvino, The Non-Existent Night, also by Calvino, and The Cloven Viscount, also by Italo Calvino. The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Beauty of the Husband by Anne Carson, Virginia Woolf's The New Dress and Other Stories, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino, The Vegetarian by Han Kang, Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, Nocturnes by Kazuo Ishiguro, Just Above My Head by James Baldwin, The Rainbow by Yasunari Kawabata, and finally 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Oh wait, no, I can't say finally because there are 4 more. Wait. These are also books I haven't read yet. First of all, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which I'm so excited about reading. World Light by Haldor Laxness, another one I'm really looking forward to. And this little guy, Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome. And finally, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman in this stunning, gorgeous edition. Kind of like standing, honestly. I kind of like filming things standing. Maybe I need to do that more. It's sort of freeing, I don't know. It's almost like having a person in front of me. I'm literally looking at you in the eye right now. That is beside the point. What I wanted to say is thank you for being here. We've made it to the end. That was my bookshelf tour. Thank you so much for letting me ramble and ramble, because I expect this to have been quite a bit longer than it would have needed to be. But yeah, I just appreciate it. I loved talking about all of these things with you and sharing my bookshelf, because honestly, this is kind of like documenting a very specific time in my life, because bookshelves always change. And I personally just love seeing people's bookshelves and kind of being a fly on the wall on how they like to decorate their space and what kind of books one owns. I think that says a lot about a person, the books that you decide to keep. I hope this was at least of some interest to you. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. And yeah, just thanks. But yeah, that is really all. Thank you so much for listening to me. This kind of made me so happy. I don't know. I'm kind of hyped now. I hope you're having a nice day. If you are not having a nice day, that is fine too. I'm thinking about you either way. And I'm already looking forward to seeing you again next week. And until then, bye!